All of it, our economics, our basic economics is being challenged. And as the population of California and Oregon expanded and grew, there were less clams and there were less, crabs and less, though the elk almost went extinct, less deer, quail, except for whatever, everything was being diminished, mining sets in, etc. So I don't want to get on that history, but the point is, it was a culture, it is a culture in peril to this day. So anyway, that's kind of how we got here. And then the Delaware Indian Welfare Association, dee-ni, had continued to broadcast within itself this idea that, well, we wanted to bring back and support and maintain aspects of culture. I'm again mimicking what I heard growing up.
So what year is that?
We're probably talking at the end of the 50s.
Okay, so would you say that the end of the 50s is the turning point of those people that wanted to regenerate and to start
Enrich,
revitalize the Tolowa culture, language again?
Exactly.
So
Like
the
100
50s.
years.
It was the 50s. It was those adults that were alive in the 50s that were having their children at that point.
And so name some of those.
Well,
that
see,
you
like,
remember.
well, there were several layers there, like Sam Lopez and his wife, Ahmed, for example. Cornelius and Irene Knapp. Ethel Scott, for example. My mother, Eunice, and Edwin Lopez.
Corny and Irene Knapp.
Some of the Moorhead brothers, Frank and Fred Moorhead, and several of the Richardses, Goldwell Richards, and some of the Jameses families, all started talking about this. Lopez families, what? Oh, some of those elders are still in there from the 70s.
Oh, in those books.
From the 70s, that's from the 70s.
A lot of their names are in here though, like this, they recognize that.
Whipples?
How about Goebel?
Goldwell
Richards.
Yes, Goldwell Richards for sure, yes. And his, Walter Richards was one of the singers, see, some of these people were singers
Ellen
still.
Norris.
Yeah.
And they had specific
Ellen
roles.
Norris, yeah.
Amelia Brown. Some people were
Brown.
stronger in different areas, or?
Yeah, like some people were, like some were expert singers, some were great storytellers, some were good language
That they
speakers.
maintain
Regalia
their cultural
makers.
identity.
Yeah.
Like the Nats were a regalia, right?
Yeah, they owned a lot. And then Laura Bailey was the last full-on, straight-up basket maker. And she died in '62, I think it was. But she was one who was real famous for making tons of baskets. For example, she was one of the, but as that generation is coming to an end, that generation was the last of the original 111ers,
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
their 111s were all turned to powder blue, by then, they were soft, because they hadn't since they were girls. But they were little old ladies, still had their 111s. So that was that period of time. From that other whole cast of time.
Harriet then?
Harriet, yeah, Bernice came home after that point. She had restaurants and stuff. She kind of moved north and came home finally.
How did she know the language so well then?
Because that's how she grew up.
Oh, she grew
That was
up
her
and then
first
moved
language.
away and
Yeah.
then
Like
back.
Catherine lived down in the south too, isn't it?
Yeah, well, see, there was a program it was like a
San Francisco.
Domestic servants.
domestic servancy program. And they came and they asked young women to leave their communities and become professional women. Really know how to polish that stove. Learn how to really wax that floor.
Take care of those
Make sure
kids.
that window was spotless, Irene Nat's house was like going into,
A museum.
just
Really?
not a speck of dust anywhere, everything ironed to the corners, they all went through the system. And they were shipped off to San Francisco.
That's
And
how that
some,
was.
so a bunch of them never came back, some did make it back, eventually.
Some of the women that during that time frame were subjected to the involuntary sterilization
Yeah, that was the
program that
20s.
the Indian Affairs did. And so when we all got together in the 50s, there were single women with no children.
Yeah.
So then when us baby boomers came on the set, the baby boomers, we had first and second, third cousins that would come together, and we were the ones they taught.
When I
At
got
Gus Chu
A
Hall
lot of
every
sterilized
Saturday.
women who didn't have their own kids and grandkids.
Every Saturday, we
Grandmas
would
and
meet at
aunties.
Gus Chu Hall and meet with all the old folks at that time, and they taught us the songs and
protocols and how to behave and whatever.
And then we also went to their meetings because they had organized meetings with Robert's Rules of Order and all
Because they're
that.
still Indian people, they just want
Yeah.
to keep them.
Yeah, and then termination came in 1960, and as a kid, I didn't realize what even that meant, and I didn't know we were terminated.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I became a teenager, I went, oh my God, we're terminated. You know, like
What does that
politically.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but as far as what I'm talking about, the language, the sociology and stuff, the social culture was very different, you know. So that came out of that, and so it was then in the late 1960s that this man named Tom Parsons, who was running a place called the Center for Community Development at Humboldt State University, and he always described himself as a catalyst. So he would look around Northern Cal, because he was at the university, and he'd say, "Ooh, those people are trying to do grapes." I'm just picking some subjects or something, I forget. I mean, he did tons of these things. Oh, and these women are working on the La Leche League, you know, whatever, or these guys. And then he looked, oh, these Indians, though, I didn't know any Indians because they were on the East Coast, right? And so he's like, oh, these Indians over here trying to work on language, you know, and these Indians over here trying to revive a dance. These Indians over here trying to redevelop a dance place or canoe or whatever. And so he'd take a little bit of his cash from his endowment that he had there and he'd throw it at it, you know. Or he'd go to the university and write letters and stuff and do advocacy work to try to get this and that. And he's the one that got the eminence credential through for American New Languages, for example, that I got to actually enjoy in 1980, you know, when I graduated.
And also prerequisite to that or concurrent to it, there was a group of Indian women who were the catalyst for the state of California for organizing organizations after termination, which included medical, social organizations through the Intertribal Council of California, through United Health Services, and that's what started it. And we had women here that were going to meet with other women across the state that helped organize. Because the reason why the women were such a catalyst in it is that the men were off falling trees, working somewhere, earning a living as a primary breadwinner. And so some women were able to do that. And that's how we got started. There was Pomo Indian women, our women here. All over the state came together, and I really am grateful for them because they were such visionaries and looked at what our communities needed statewide and looked at all tribes.
Because when the Intertribal Council started, I think in 1968, wasn't it, when it officially opened, I think. And Mom lucked out and got one of the first jobs as a social worker. And so when she finally quit that, she had the most seniority in Intertribal Council. Was it 16 years or something like that? When she finally quit working for them. It was a while, but she did a lot of that. Where she
Well, and she told me that when she worked for Intertribal Council, that she promoted the rest of our own women, Tolowa women, to go into paying jobs, to get out of the lily farms, and to promote self, determination and strong.
Yeah. So all the advocacy. So there's really a time of advocacy at that period of time. And,
so what had happened too is that Betty Green and Mom were going to Humboldt State University and they helped get ITEP started, the Indian Teacher Education Program down there in Norco, which then became Norcoa Health, which then became
Redwood League.
United Health Services through the CRIB, California Rural Indian Health Board. All these things came together, and Tom Parsons was right there.
Right there.
It was such an opportune time.
Yeah, writing and advocating and
He came here
going
every
up against the man. You know what I mean? The man being the system.
We should have Tom Parsons Day.
Yeah, really.
No, that's not
He just recently passed here a couple of years ago. And he drove up here every single Wednesday.
We wore out 2 Mustangs.
The only way we could go to the language class, culture class, was we had to have a C or better in all of our classes. It only met for 5th and 6th period on Wednesdays. So if you wanted to go to that class, you had to maintain, at least a 7 or better.
We started when we were in elementary school.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean that was kind of the rule, so that you could be in this special class, and they would some of them, like in wheelchairs. Like when we went around, first used to walk in. By the end, she was in a wheelchair, but she lived to be 110. And then there was like Auntie Ellen and Ella Norris and Eileen Nat and Harriet Smith and the people named in these books. That all were a part of that. Sam Lopez and Edward and Lena did the dance stuff heavily. They were the ones that promoted the dance the biggest, and so on. So that all came out of the closet, as you might say. That came out of that period of time.
Out of the shame.
And pushing back the shame. And the other part, though, was intellectual. Because at that point, we had all been completely Christianized. either Catholic, Methodist, Foursquare, Shaker, and then of course the new religions were Mormon and others. I mean, Holy Rollers going down the street, whatever, all kinds.
Trying to save the
And so, J-Dubs, all Americana Christianity. And so when a lot of these cultural events began to occur, there was a lot of sociology around that because people were, you're going to go to hell, Satan's working through you,
Devil's worship.
don't go back to satanic and spirituous ways, this is evil, your soul's going to be lost, etc. And it was at that point, though, it wasn't even external Christianity, it was internalized Christianity. It was Indians doing it to Indians and saying that to Indians. Big time, like,
And we did have graduates from the boarding schools coming back, being involved, and it was
Bertha involved?
which
Yeah.
came home.
oh yeah,
Who?
Bertha.
and because they had survived. And when you look back on it now, that's why I wish we could do a screenplay and put all this together to show what happened to our part of the world. And how big the struggle was for us to keep our language and keep doing what we had. Like what Lauren's describing right now, I can remember when we were at Fescu Hall and we want to know more of the prayers and formulas for training and stuff like that. Because we were into it. Kids, you want to move around and Sam stood up there and said, "I became a Christian in 1932. I can't teach you those things. I won't teach you those things." And we just stood there like almost in tears crying because he made that choice for us that if it was evil or not. You see? And so it was this whole thing and we're coming out of it though, coming out of the shadows, the phoenix was trying to rise out of the dust. And and so we're thankful, I am very thankful for that foresight and the vision that generation before
Because it
us
was the
had.
generation underneath of him, because he was like in his 70s.
Yeah.
He was 74, I think, when I was born. So he lived to be 96. So, 91. Was it 91? 91, I think it was, yeah. So it was the generation underneath of them that were going, hey, all this is going to be lost and forgotten if you don't do something about it.
Right.
So that's,
Gotta save it,
yeah, so they were kind of like, and finally I remember the time we danced at Klamath for the Salmon Festival, and Sam said, sisters and brothers, we're going to do Indian dancing today, but I realized something. And he said, well, and he's talking, we all just listen, of course, because he's the spokesperson. And he goes, I realize that God that I prayed to in the Bible is the same God my ancestors knew. Let's dance. And so there we went, And then, so that put it together for us, the generation, because up until then it was a separation.
Well, thank God.
Evil versus
Yeah.
good. And everything Indian was evil. And everything Christian and white was good, right? And so we're just being ripped apart sociologically all the time because, God,
Living all these
I
different.
tan too well, dang it, or whatever, what I'm saying? And I have to bear that, plus them trying to fit in over here, but he kind of patched it together right there
And then the other thing
by that
was,
statement. It was
the other thing
crazy.
that happened for us too is that with the social revolution, I call it United States, which helped us all to begin recognizing we as humans. You know what I mean? Of course, the women's rights came in,
Oh, yeah.
black rights came in, all those things. The American Indian movement really helped also. Because I can remember going to school in Fort Dick and being discriminated against, where Lauren and I Vicki had to have our own seat behind the bus driver because we were so discriminated against when we stepped on the bus.
We couldn't sit down.
Really?
Yeah.
They wouldn't let us sit down. And so then Mrs. Green made a special
It was a
seat for
part.
us. And yeah. So then,
That is
but then as time went on and our United States got questioned more and more about our values and what we're doing.
Just watch
all
Forrest
that-
Gump,
Yeah, watch Forrest Gump.
and you'll get the whole story.
So our own, what's her name, Parks? Rosa
Rosa
Parks.
Parks.
Yeah,
You guys are the Rosa Parks.
yes.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got our seat. We had to
Yeah.
sit on a little reservation. I didn't know to call it a reservation at the time, but that's what it was.
And we didn't know,
I'm a rancheria.
and like Lauren said, we didn't know that we weren't supposed to be Indians. It didn't matter that politically we were terminated, we were still discriminated
Because
against.
Graham never taught you